They showed up at my gate on a Monday night with flashlights and a plan, and I remember thinking, very calmly, that somebody had written the script for a movie and forgot to cast the part where reality gets ugly. My name is Ethan Rhodes. I own a ramshackle cabin on 5 acres outside Hollow Creek, and all I wanted was to keep the porch light on, drink bad coffee, and play cards with my friends. That's where it starts: the poker table, the cigarette smoke, the way quiet lives break. I moved out here because the city was a noise that wore me thin, because fixing your own roof felt honest. The neighbors were spaced out. For 3 years it was mowing, wood stove evenings, monthly poker nights, comfortable, ordinary. Then Marla Hargrove got elected president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, and rules started to look like leverage. Marla smiled like she had a plan. At first it was petty notes about paint and parking, but soon she was drawing dotted lines on maps: red zones, threat areas, and my front 30 feet were suddenly in violation. I asked for paperwork, asked who signed the resolution, and watched her smile tighten. Rules are rules, Ethan, she said, like that settled it. Later we learned she had allies: a developer wanting access, and a few neighbors ready to believe a tidy solution. My friends came by because that's what you do: Lena, a nurse who notices everything; Marco, who runs a logging outfit; Jonah, a civics teacher who believes in the system. We laughed at first, because sometimes laughter keeps you from breaking something. Then the harassment started. Anonymous notes, a camera planted facing my gate, strangers volunteering for patrols, and a dead sparrow on my mailbox like a bad joke that meant menace. One rainy night Marco called. Men in the tree line with radios. I walked the property, flashlight in hand, and heard low voices, not questions, just talking like they owned the dark. The next morning a laminated flyer hung on my gate: Neighborhood Defense Unit, with names and a phone number. It was Marla's handwriting on the bottom, neat as sin. The night they crossed the property was the moment the whole thing stopped being a petty HOA fight and became dangerous. 7 men, homemade vests, a shotgun case slung over one shoulder. They said they were securing the area and serving notice. I told them they had no authority. I tried to record them. Jonah stepped out from the porch, steady voice, told them to wait for the sheriff. One of the men stumbled, the shotgun case hit the dirt, and somewhere a neighbor made a call. Sirens came later, and the chaotic clatter of people who had convinced themselves they were doing the right thing scattered into the dark. We started collecting everything. Lena photographed the bird and the pamphlets. Marco drove with a cooler full of receipts. Jonah dug through meeting minutes. The receipts for vests and radios were on the HOA account. A survey had no certified stamp. Signatures on a resolution were forged. What looked like a grassroots defense had a payment trail to an HOA card and deposits from a shell company tied to the developer. There was a town hall where Marla faced me across a folding table and said, in that thin voice leaders use when they need obedience, "Ethan, we're protecting property values." I remember the room, fluorescents humming, folding chairs, a dog asleep at someone's feet, and I asked, "You're protecting whose values?" She didn't answer. Instead, she recited bylaws like scripture, the sort of recital that sounds like law but isn't. Jonah stood up and asked about signatures. She smiled and said, "We all voted." One neighbor, Carl, later handed over a receipt he hadn't meant to keep. He'd been asked to help install cameras for safety, and when investigators asked, he produced the little slip tying the purchase to the HOA account. Small choices matter: a receipt kept in a drawer, a voicemail saved in a box, a favor done without thinking. Those small records became pieces of the puzzle. The investigators were patient in a boring, effective way. They went through ledgers and emails like people tracing a faint trail on an old map, and when they brought their findings to the prosecutor, it stopped being rumor and became fact. Evidence quiets gossip, which is an unspectacular but crucial part of justice. Indictments followed for conspiracy, forgery, and embezzlement. A few volunteers faced charges for trespass and brandishing. The HOA board was dissolved. The developer's plan stalled. Trial days were long and oddly ordinary. I watched Marla answer questions with the same clipped cadence she used at meetings, watched the prosecution lay out a paper trail with a mechanic's clarity. There were moments of ugliness, neighbors ashamed, others doubling down, and moments that felt like film. Marla's receipt shown on a projector, and the room going quiet. Lena holding up photos of the bird, and everyone seeing what that small cruelty meant. Jonah on the stand describing the night the case hit the dirt. What surprised me most was how human it all was, not cartoon evil, but petty ambition stacked into cruelty. Marla had a mortgage and a reputation she guarded. The developer had charts and a deadline. Motive doesn't excuse behavior, but it explains how ordinary people manufacture permission for bad deeds. It also makes the aftermath complicated. Legal wins don't unring the bell of small harms. Apologies often come with release clauses and signatures. There was a cost. The man who carried the shotgun case lost his job. His family had to make hard choices. Some neighbors who'd cheered the defense unit became strangely quiet. Justice produced fines and restitution, some short sentences, and the dissolving of a board that had grown too comfortable with power. The developer's funding evaporated. Plans to cut trees and widen a road were shelved. Rebuilding trust in the neighborhood became its own work. We started public forums where people could learn how HOA finances work. We forced transparency, open ledgers, posted minutes, independent audits. Ordinary stewardship replaced the theater of authority, slowly. People learned to ask for stamped surveys and certified minutes instead of taking polite smiles for truth. I don't frame myself as some hero. The story is useful because it shows how small things metastasize: a stapled note, a forged line, a decision to volunteer for patrols. Those are the dominoes. If you care about home, if you care about a neighbor's right to live without intimidation, the work starts small. Keep your receipts, go to meetings, ask for documentation, and watch who benefits. These events changed me in small, honest ways. I learned to read a meeting agenda the way I once read a map. I learned to keep a folder of every scrap of paper that touches my land. I began to notice how people talk about safety. The word gets used as a cloak sometimes, and it's on us to look under it. There's a humility to that. You trade a little of your time to check records, to ask hard questions, to show up. The trade is worth it because the alternative is living with a slow pressure that makes your life feel shifted under your feet. Sometimes I still wake up and hear the echo of that shotgun case dropping in the darkest sound that once meant danger and now means memory. But then Lena brings over coffee in a thermos and Marco tells the same dumb joke he's told for years, and the world rights itself in tiny increments. The porch light flickers on, the cards get shuffled, and for now, that's enough. When I look back, I don't see a tidy revenge arc. There were no cinematic arrests on my driveway, no dramatic confession at sunset. The victory was quieter. Cameras left because records became safety, trees stayed because the road plans collapsed, poker nights returned with cheap beer and better coffee. The porch light stays on because vigilance is practical now. And still, the ending is not neat. Power finds new faces. Years from now, another steward might believe they can redraw a neighborhood with maps and bravado. The lesson is simple. Structures without accountability become tools. Small cruelties can gather weight until they move mountains. So I sit on my porch and think about witness, how a signature matters, how a receipt matters, how choosing to speak matters more than we guess. If someone knocks on your gate and claims they're protecting the block, ask who paid for the flashlights. Ask who benefits. Have you ever lived beside someone who turned stewardship into power? Would you have fought differently, or let it slide and hoped it went away? Drop a comment, share your story, and tell me where you draw the line between safety and overreach. If you like messy true stories, subscribe. There's always another one.